Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent. Festival of Legends and the core set rotation is coming up soon. A lot is going to be changing in Hearthstone, and I'll be talking about Druid today. We're going to go through all the new cards in Festival of Legends, the core set changes, how their meta decks have been affected, and what new deck archetypes I expect to pop up as a result of all this. With the new Druid cards from Festival of Legends, there are sort of two clear packages. One is the Hero Power package, and the other is a pseudo package, really, more than anything else. It's the Get Big Minions Later package of Timber, Tambourine, and Rhythm and Roots, and I'm going to go through that first since it includes their legendary spell, and additionally it's a sort of simple package to talk about, because it really just comes down to a fundamental question: is 4 mana do nothing okay? Because if it's not, this package doesn't work. My gut feeling is that as Druid can make a ramp deck and has more mana to waste on their classes, this will be more tolerable there, and the payoff for your 4 mana do nothing cards is pretty severe. Summon 3/5 Ancients in 2 turns is kind of a lot. And for what it's worth, I think this choose one secretly option is not a great implementation of the mechanic. I think that you always respawn the same way regardless of which choice they pick. You look for burn to kill them before you have to deal with the board, or you look for hard removal to clear the whole board and not deal with any of it either way. Additionally, as the Druid, I think you always pick the Ancients. I think waiting 4 turns for marginally bigger minions is pointless, because you're just looking to tax out all of the enemy's ability to remove your minions, and that means that you're always going to be getting a hard board clear or killing them, basically. There's no reason to wait longer. Additionally, waiting longer gives them more time to find the answers, and in aggro matchups you never take the slower one. I think if this just said summon 3/5/5 Ancients in 2 turns, its overall play patterns would remain identical to what they currently are. But I do genuinely think that even though 4 mana do nothing sucks, 3/5/5 Ancients and only 2 turns, if you're not already getting run over, if you're stable somewhat against aggro decks at the point you play this, I think this is a good enough payoff to get played. And I think alongside Timber Tambourine, you really start to see the archetype as something that might function. Timber Tambourine's a 4 mana 2/3 weapon, death rattle, summon a 5/5 Ancient, and play cards that cost 5 or more while equipped to improve. Cards like Nourish, cards like the new Summer Flowerchild, cards that you really want to be playing on 5, and cards that you really want to follow up your curve with anyway. Realistically, this is also 2 turns afterwards summon a number of 5/5 Ancients, probably 3, because you're going to play 1 on 5, 1 on 6. You can hold off and try to fill your whole board with Ancients, but odds are if you're summoning 3 of them, that's just good enough. So this idea of repeatedly summoning large quantity of Ancients and filling out your board and exhausting your opponent's removal really does seem like a thing that Druid can build for and eventually run their opponent over now. And this is a better 4 mana do nothing, because it does do a little bit. It deals 6 damage over 3 turns, which is not nothing. And I feel basically the same about both of these cards. If playing this slowly with this game plan is viable, they're both great cards. And if it's not, they're completely unplayable. And I do think it is viable, especially because it fits with the other package Druid got, which is the Hero Power package, and that'll be helping you stay alive in the early game because it includes 6 early minions. You start off with the Free Spirit. It's a 1 mana 1/2 card, Undead Beast tag, that has Battlecry and Death Rattle. Your Hero Power gains 1 more armor this game. So you have a 1-drop that makes it harder to die because you have a better armor up than Warrior just from playing 1 of them. That's already really solid. It's not quite built around here yet, but if you were going to build around it, the Peaceful Piper would be a great card, because it's a 1 mana 1/1 with choose 1, draw a beast, or discover 1, and if the only beast in your deck are Hero Power upgrade beast, then that's a pretty good effect. You don't ever want to pick discover 1, you pretty much always want to tutor 1 out. And I do keep saying 1 because there's a second Hero Power beast for the attack side. Groovy Cat's a 2 mana 2/1, Battlecry and Death Rattle, same thing but for attack this time. And it's just terrifying. I think it's reasonable to expect that in every single game that Druid runs this archetype, they're going to hit 2 Hero Power upgrades. It might not always be 2 of the different ones. It might be 5 armor one game, 5 attack the next, 3/3 the one after that. But I think you can reasonably expect Hero Power Druid to get a ridiculous Hero Power going. And I think you can lean into the archetype even harder of flooding the board and boosting your Hero Power by running cards like Unending Swarm, because then you're resummoning these Death Rattle minions, boosting your Hero Power up, exhausting your opponent's removal further. It's really, really scary. This seems like a very strong set of cards. I would be shocked if some variant of Hero Power Druid wasn't at least tier 2. You would think that having 2 mana, gain 5 armor, deal 5 damage would be the payoff for the archetype, but in fact it's not. Zoc Fogsnout is claiming to be the payoff for the archetype. He's a 7 mana 6/6 Quillbore with Battlecry, summon 2 1/1 Quillbore with Taunt. I mean, he's good. Realistically, he's a 9-mana card, because you're going to hero power for a huge value and then play him, and then you're going to get these big taunts. And at this point, we have 2 Unending Swarms, Zoc, 2 Timber Tambourines, and a Rhyme and Rhythm, 6 separate cards that all individually fill the board with huge minions, and this probably gets through most decks. I think Blood Death Knight is just about the only thing with enough removal to grind through all of that. But even then, that doesn't mean they'll win, because your hero power might just result in you winning at the end of it anyway, because it has so much inherent value. I think Zoc's fine. I think if you're running this archetype, there's not a good reason to cut him. And a lot of people talk about him being a good tempo play, like using Tour Guide and getting him out on 7 immediately with his effect being pretty effective. I don't think Druid tends to play for high tempo 7 drops. That's not really the game plan. Additionally, you need a really disgusting curve for that to work out, right? Because you're not ramping and playing those little minions that buff your Battlecry at the same time. You have to include Tour Guide in your deck, which is a little bit awkward for Druid. On the whole, I think the idea of Zoc being a tempo play doesn't really work out. But just as a dude that comes down and puts big stuff on the board, he's basically just giant Cenarius, right? Like, Cenarius is a 5/8 that summons 2/2/2 taunts, oh no. This is just what Cenarius wishes he was. And Cenarius isn't the tempo play, neither is this. I don't see this ever being good where you're running Tour Guides and trying to run over your opponent with this. I feel like that deck is going to be very inconsistent. You're very rarely going to have everything line up perfectly to have a good turn 7 Zoc. So you may as well just embrace the fact that it's happening on turn 9 anyway. And I suppose Spread the Word is actually part of this package as a 4-mana Arcane Intellect, draw 2 cards, cost 1 less for each attack your hero has. So Timber Tambourine synergizes pretty directly with this, as does the hero power archetype. This is probably just a good card. I don't think it's hard to justify putting it into the deck where it belongs. For some reason, I'm lukewarm about the card. Draw your deck if you've drawn the parts of your deck you cared about, is how I read that, right? Like, if you've drawn Groovy Cat or Timber Tambourine, things are going alright. You didn't really need the Spread the Word. It's still a good card. I'm not going to call it one more because it's a draw card that automatically synergizes with like everything the deck plans to do. But I do think it's worth noting that it's a little bit awkward to have a draw card that synergizes with the things that you're looking to draw the hardest. And I guess Harmonic Mood technically is a Zoc synergy card. You can play this alongside your Zoc and it'll make the minions better. If you have a Tour Guide, because otherwise you don't have 11 mana, so. You can run the new River Croc that gives you 11 max mana and you can play this alongside Zoc. I'm gonna be honest with you, this just doesn't seem very playable. Compared to everything else you can be putting in your Druid deck, why would you pick this? That's just how I feel about it. It doesn't seem great. Especially seeing as this is the expansion where the quest is rotating. If the quest were in the game, this would be a lot more appealing, but without that, I'm not interested. Now, in a little while, we'll talk about what's rotated, and we're gonna find out that you lose a lot in Token Druid. Most importantly, you lose your endgame buff in Pride's Fury. So here's Drum Circle. It only costs 7 mana. You're gonna get that late in the game, right? It gives you choose one, summon 5 2/2 treants, or give your minions +2/+4 in taunt. I'm gonna be honest, this is just way too slow for the effects it gives. At 7 mana +2/+4 in taunt, you're gonna need to hit several minions with this for it to get value, and at that late in the game, I feel like that's not really reasonable unless your minions were already the huge spam minions we were talking about in that archetype that didn't need this effect in the first place. Summon 5 2/2s for 7 mana is just nowhere near good enough either. This card is not going to be the savior that Token Druid needed, and I don't see it getting any play. Although I will have no doubt that it will get played against me, I'll be like, why is that in your deck? And it will win the game instantly, and I will go and cry aggro tears in the corner. But there is one more card for the Druids that I think is very strong and going under the radar a lot for some reason. It's the Summer Flowerchild. It's a 5 mana 4/5, so its stats are fine, not great. Battlecry, draw 2 cards that cost 6 or more, finale they cost 1 less. So like, obviously the immediate complaint about this card is I want to play Nourish on turn 5. However, you don't always get to play Nourish on turn 5. Additionally, you can play 5 mana cards after Nourish. It doesn't have to be on turn 5. This is a card that tutors your endgame. In this hypothetical deck I've been talking about where we're playing the hero power stuff, this is guaranteed to draw in mana cheat stuff like Zoc, stuff like Never-Ending Swarm, or whatever it's called. The 6 mana summon all your 2 mana or less creatures that died this game. This is guaranteed to draw late game cards that you cared about in that ramp deck that runs Nourish. I think the fact that this gives you more consistency on hitting something meaningful on turn 5 is really, really valuable, and I think the fact that this is just a good effect, draw 2, gain 2 mana, This is really, really good text, and I think it's being severely underrated by the community at large based on what else I've watched. I don't know that it's like an auto-include in every Druid deck, but it sort of feels that way to me. This thing just seems incredible. And it's also the only like standalone card that Druid got. The rest of the set is either that relatively small big spam package or just everything tangentially linking in it to Zok and Hero Power Druid. Then you have Drum Circle as a token nod to Token Druid, which is nowhere near enough to save them, and you have Summer Flowerchild, which to me just feels like an individually very strong card. Coming over to core set rotation, Druid is losing Fandral Staghelm, Force of Nature, Earthen Scales, and Mounted Raptor. Earthen Scales is the only one of those that got any play, and it's such a swingy card that I'm glad to see it leaving, because it can result in matchups where it's just like they have Earthen Scales and they live, or they don't and they die, and that sort of binary is just not fun to be involved with on either side. I don't like saying I have Earthen Scales so I win, and I don't like saying if he has Earthen Scales I lose. Fandral Staghelm I'm sad to see go, even though he apparently hasn't been seeing much play, which is easy to believe. And then coming over to what they're getting back, they're getting Kiri, Chosen of Elune, as well as Solar and Lunar Eclipse. Kiri never saw any play, but Solar and Lunar Eclipse are both very good cards, and they will definitely see some amount of play. Those are very nice. I think on the whole, Druid is gaining with this. And they're also getting Witchwood Apple, which has been buffed to 1 mana, and the 2/2 treants it adds to your hand are also being buffed to 1 mana. Which is going to help token a lot, to be honest, but it still needs a payoff that isn't there. Coming over to the buff Druid minions, Ancient of Lore is up to 7/7, Druid of the Clawless stats increased on both forms, Soul of the Forest is down to 3 mana, which is very nice, and treants are down to 1, like I said earlier. And then for some reason, Witchwood Apple is off when it's lonesome across the page over here. It's down to 1 mana, which is nice. On the whole, the buffs are really appreciated, but nothing super major except for Soul of the Forest, I feel. Now, let's start talking about the meta decks that Druid had and how they fared. Herald Aggro Druid is dead. Their payoff cards were Herald of Nature and Pride's Fury. Those aren't in the game anymore. So now you just put down a bunch of minions and you give them Death Rattle, summon a 2/2. That doesn't really feel like it wins you the game, does it? So yeah, Aggro Druid is sort of just dead this expansion. I don't really see how you make a functional deck. Also, additionally, they're losing Druid of the Reef, Iron Deep Trog, Peasants, Claw Fury Adept, and Jerry Rig Carpenter. So most of their, Thorngrowth of Sentries too. So they also lose most of their curve. Like the whole deck just gone. One of the dominant decks at High Legend right now is Quest Druid. You really just use the quest for value, for armor and card draw, and a good tempo play that can give you alternate win conditions if you get disrupted enough. But your main game plan is to use Brann to duplicate Astalor with Ani Rakan and kill your opponent in 1 turn because Wildheart Guff gave you too much mana. And I've got to say, I'm glad to see this deck going. They're losing Brann, they're losing Wildheart Guff, they're losing Pathmakers, which are hugely valuable cards in general, they're losing Moonlight Guidance, Coldtooth Mine, they're losing the quest itself. The biggest thing here is just the loss of Brann. Brann is core to that deck's combo, and without Brann, its maximum damage output drops from whatever it previously was, which I think was 54 or 56, down to Astalor, which is just 14. There's no duplication effects anymore, and it becomes, a fair ramp deck now that looks nothing like this. You have to play for a real win condition and not just OTK your opponent. And coming over to Questless Ramp Druid, you can see that it's still the same thing. Brann Astalor is still the win condition. So again, Ramp Druid has to be reimagined, it has to do something else, but it's okay, they don't have to go long without a broken idea behind the deck. Coming over to the Hearthstone Deck Builder, you can see my current Theorycraft for a Hero Power Ramp Druid. We're running the entire Hero Power package, basically. It's why we're including Rake, it's because that card's just way too strong if you have a 5-attack Hero Power. I'm running Wrath because my main fear with this deck is getting run over by aggro. I think that realistically, if you don't get killed by aggro, this deck has the most late game value out of any deck in the game. And then we're running all of the hero power stuff in addition to all of the spam stuff with Rhythm and Roots and Tambourine. We're ramping, of course, Summer Flowerchild to tutor our endgame, which is only 6 cards, being Unending Swarm to duplicate another board and get these hero power effects to go off a second time. Zodok Fog Snout to spam the board, a new Brakan, because, it's still essentially an 8 mana gain 8 armor, summon a 7/7 if you need the health, or just a 0 mana 7/7 if you didn't need the health. Like, regardless of how you use a new Brakan, it's always going to be a strong card. And then we have Miracle Growth. This could probably be made into a faster deck by cutting Miracle Growth and putting in Spread the Word. For me, I feel more comfortable in believing this deck will work as a ramp deck. And because of that, if I'm ramping up, I'm going to have the mana to summon an 8/8 taunt and draw 3 cards. I think if the meta is slowing down, Miracle Growth is likely going to be a good card, and a lot of the stuff in the meta, while it's still strong and gaining new tools, isn't as fast as it used to be. Honestly, the main argument regarding Miracle Growth in my eyes is that you want Summer Flowerchild to more reliably tutor the other endgame cards. But honestly, none of them feel individually important. This feels like a deck where I'm trying to just throw stuff at you until you run out of responses, in which case Miracle Growth is right up that alley. And even though I'm not super confident in this exact build, I'm not super confident in any exact Theorycraft that I put out. I want to play the deck and figure out what's weak and what's strong and what I need to change. I'm very confident that some version of this package, Free Spirit, Peaceful Piper, Rake, Groovy Cats, like those 4 cards will be together in a tier 2 deck or higher, pretty much guaranteed. This package feels absolutely nuts to me. Anyways, I'll never have been got harder than if I'm wrong about Hero Power Druid. It just feels so strong to me. For now though, I'm done. I've been Rather Coherent. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about standard Druid rotation, how it's going to be changing, what it's going to be getting from Festival of Legends. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really does help the channel grow, and I'll see you in the next one.